Hey, what is up guys, Mergaman4 here, and Series 11 has come to a close. Only 10 episodes long. It went by really quick, but yeah, the Series 11 finale just aired a few days ago, and now I'm here to give my thoughts and opinions on it, and a couple of final thoughts on Series 11. So, the Battle of Ranskoor and Kolos. A real mouthful of a title that doesn't really fit the episode at all because we don't ever see the battle because it happened before the episode even takes place. There really could have been a better title for this episode, but oh well. Titles aren't exactly the most important part of an episode's quality, but how does the rest of the episode stand up? We have a very interesting beginning, actually. We start with these two people out in these mountains, this gorgeous landscape, and it kind of turns out they have some sort of psychic power. There's a mentor and the mentee, and he's trying to learn to harness his power, and then a mysterious figure appears that we don't know who he is, except we really do because it's really obvious. And actually, that just makes me think. So you might be aware that this season has been very tight on spoilers and has been very secretive. This is the first time in recent memory at least that I can remember, that we didn't know at least all the episode titles in a brief one-sentence synopsis before the series began. We didn't find out the title or synopses for the last 2 episodes of this series until, I want to say 3, at most 1 month ago, which is a little bit crazy. But anyway, before Doctor Who episodes go to air, they usually get sent out to select people to watch them and give pre-air reviews, or to be able to have reviews ready for when the episode itself comes out. And that happens for almost every single episode. Sometimes, in the case where there are major spoilers, you have the main episode and you have, the spoilery bit cut out. For example, Dark Water from 2014 revealed the return of the Master. The scene that reveals it's the Master got removed from the pre-air review. In this case, there were no pre-air showings of this finale. It didn't get sent out to anyone. So naturally, your natural conclusion is, well, obviously, there's got to be some sort of big spoiler that they don't want people knowing. And there is nothing of that sort in this episode. There is nothing really worth keeping secret. I mean, obviously, it's more interesting when you go into an episode knowing less, but there's nothing about this episode that would, assuming you do enjoy it, that would spoil your enjoyment from knowing beforehand. Mainly because the only real thing that could be considered a twist is the most predictable thing, and everyone knew it was going to happen anyway, and that's the return of Tzim-Sha from the premiere. It's something that people have been predicting since the premiere itself. As soon as we saw him teleport before he died, everyone was like, okay, he's going to be back later in the series. And especially in episode 2, when there was the mention of the Tzim-Sha, there was no reason to mention that unless he was going to be coming back, or the Tzim-Sha were going to be coming back in the finale. And then, further, the trailers for the episode hinted at it. You hear his voice, and another trailer has the Doctor saying, I recognize that voice. Everyone knew it was going to be Tzim-Sha. I don't think that was a surprise for anybody. So, why did they bother not sending out pre-air reviews? I don't really understand that, because there was nothing in here that was really worth preserving, I don't think. It didn't have any more twists. Well, actually, I'd argue there are some other episodes in this season that definitely have more shocking things in them. For example, the frog in last week's episode. It's something that, is so out of left field. But but this just doesn't really have any surprises in it. So I don't know, I don't really get that. And the reason I bring that up is because, of course, the figure that appears in this opening sequence is Tzim-Sha. You don't see that it's him right away, but he arrives by teleport, and he's very clearly damaged. And if you had seen the premiere, and you have a general idea of how Doctor Who and its finales usually work, i.e. they're usually connected to past episodes, then it shouldn't be any surprise whatsoever. But that's not really a fault against the episode, more just the marketing surrounding the episode, so that's fine. It's just something I found just kind of interesting, I guess, and a little bit weird. Anyway, meanwhile in the TARDIS, the Doctor picks up 9 different distress calls coming from the same place on the same planet. The planet, of course, being Ranskoor of Kolos. So the planet, the atmosphere, it's got this effect that like messes with the minds of those on it. And so the Doctor has to produce these neural balancers for everyone to put on their heads to keep their minds in balance. This element is it's a weaker element of the plot because it's a cool idea. A planet having this environment that causes you to go crazy, and we see this in effect with the person that we meet on the planet after the Doctor and her companions land. Paltraki, he's lost his memory and kind of gone crazy, but one, she gives him a neural balancer, and then that has ultimately no effect. The only purpose for him having lost his memory, because he starts to gain the memories back later in the episode, is just so that certain details about the plot aren't revealed until a little bit later in the episode. So it's kind of like a cheap way of doing that. And there's also a moment later in the episode that I'm going to discuss, but something like that should have consequences. And it doesn't bring out consequences, which really sucks. But anyway, as I mentioned, they land and they meet this guy called Paltraki. And he gradually reveals some information about it. There was this battle on the planet, we don't know what about, and he can't really remember until he gets the neural balancer and starts getting these little memories back. But basically his crew has been taken, and he has this object, this giant crystal with this thing inside of it, and we don't know what it is yet. But they're in this crashed spaceship, and Paltraki gets contacted by one of the people we saw earlier in the episode, the mentor. And then we hear the voice of Tzim-Sha, and we see him on the screen, and we see him, well, off screen, he kills one of the members of Paltraki's crew that he had captured, and tells him to return the object he stole, otherwise the same thing will happen to his other crew members. And it's at this point, of course, that the Doctor, Yazran, and Graham realize that Tzim-Sha survived, and here he is. So yeah, this is like the reveal moment. I wrote in my notes, shock, horror, Tzim-Sha. Because the episode treats it like it's a big reveal, but as I mentioned before, it's like the most predictable thing ever. Honestly, I mean, in essence, it's not that bad. It works in the context of the episode. It just doesn't work as a twist. That's the thing. It treats it like a twist when it isn't really. That being said, I do want to say I am glad that Tzim-Sha came back. I think even though this series didn't really have an arc, it was a good idea to have this bookending element of Tzim-Sha, and I'm glad that he was able to have a rematch with the Doctor. Even though it is lacking in certain areas, I think it was a satisfying return for him. And I also do want to note that I did really enjoy his character in The Woman Who Fell to Earth. So yeah, I was glad to see him come back, and I was excited to see what they could do with him in a rematch between him and the Doctor and her companions. As they're making their way to where Tzim-Sha is, Graham reveals secretly to the Doctor that he will kill Tzim-Sha for what he did to Grace. Now, here's the thing, this adds some really good drama into the episode, I think. I did find it initially somewhat jarring, because he had seemed to start to come to terms with Grace, and he was always the first one to be thinking about how Grace would think, and Grace has pretty much always been represented to be this very kind and compassionate woman, very similar to the Doctor, actually. And some parallels between those two are drawn in the first episode of the series. So it did come out a little bit jarring at first, But Bradley Walsh's performance really sold it for me. And it does honestly make sense, even though, because he thought that was dealt with and done. So it makes sense for him to have moved on by this point, but now he's having to come face to face with that problem again. So of course you're going to be angry and upset and wanting to kill it. I did find it a little strange though, and still do, that Ryan didn't have as strong of a response to this, because he was obviously pretty heartbroken about his nan's death. But he was the more level-headed one, saying, no, you can't kill him. That's not what she would have wanted. But, I don't know, I feel like it would have made sense for Ryan, even if he was still, on the side of not killing him, to still be at least a little bit upset at seeing Tzim-Sha again, which he doesn't seem to be. The only people that seem to have a connection with Tzim-Sha in this episode is the Doctor and Graham. Otherwise, Ryan and Yaz don't really have much to offer in that regard. But again, Bradley Walsh really sells it for me, and I love the part where the Doctor is telling him, if you do this, you cannot travel with me. We are done. And she says, I'm serious, and he says, so am I. Great delivery. Another interesting thing that surprised me that was brought up is the Doctor's apparent inconsistent morality this season. It's something a lot of people have been pointing out, so I thought it was really interesting to see it brought up. And it shows that the people working on the show are aware of it, and it's not just an accidental inconsistency. So even past the writing stage, this would have been filmed in July, so months before the series even began, and people could have a chance to comment on that. So they're definitely aware this is a thing. And I do like this moment of the Doctor, kind of explaining her inconsistencies. Because I know one of the things about the Ghost Monument was, why is she, upset at Ryan shooting at these robots? And she mentions here that he was new, and so she's trying to lay down the ground rules from the start. Which makes sense to me. But she also does point out in a very doctory line,
also, don't cut that back to me. Our rules change all the time.
Speaking of those sniper bots, actually, they see a return in this episode because they were, of course, created with Stenza technology. So that was a little bit of a surprise to see. They're just as terrible as they were in the Ghost Monument, if not worse. They are the worst sniper bots ever. They don't get a single hit, and they are so easily taken down and fooled. There's this one scene where they're coming from both sides on Ryan and Graham, and they simply duck down, and then they just fire and kill each other. It's really silly, and it just takes you right out, because they're just so utterly useless. But finally, it's time for the big meetup between the Doctor and Tzim-Sha again. And I like this conversation that goes on between them. I thought it was really interesting to see after a season of the Doctor, doing other things, and I guess basically just forgetting about him. But yeah, and he's been waiting for the Doctor for thousands of years, and of course he's just got these thoughts of revenge, and now because these psychics from the beginning kind of treat him as a god, he's had all this power go to his head. And I thought that he worked as the villain of the episode. I feel like he could have been a lot more threatening if we saw him actually kill a couple more people like he did in The Woman Who Fell to Earth, which he doesn't here, unfortunately. But again, I found the relationship between him and the Doctor to be engaging, and I was interested in it the whole time. I will admit, though, so he's wearing his mask at first, and he takes it off, because obviously I was expecting there to be a lot of scarring or something, because when we last saw him, he was literally being melted by the DNA bombs that were planted inside him. So I was expecting to see some horribly scarred face, and that's why he was wearing the mask from the start. But no, he just looks the same, so that was a little bit underwhelming. I was like, oh, okay, big take-off mask reveal again for nothing, because it hasn't changed since last time. I also want to mention, too, that it seems like he's, requiring the mask to breathe. He's hooked up to all these machines and stuff to keep him alive. But later on, he just rips them off and seems to keep going just fine and doesn't seem to need them anymore. So I'm not really sure what that was all about. A little bit inconsistent there. Meanwhile, Graham and Ryan are off trying to find all the people that Tzim-Sha has captured, and they're going to go and set them free. There's a lovely moment where Ryan and Graham start to connect a little bit again, because they're still arguing about whether or not Graham should kill Tzim-Sha and what Grace would want. And Ryan calls him Granddad again, and this conversation between them, it leads Ryan to tell Graham that he loves him, and again, kind of like last week when he calls him Granddad for the first time, it's a really touching moment to actually have him say that out loud, because as I've said before, I've been loving seeing their relationship grow from how distant they were in The Woman Who Fell to Earth to now getting so close together by the end of the season. And it's felt completely natural to me, and I've really enjoyed seeing that relationship grow and come together. And it's probably one of the most satisfying things about this finale, just how the relationship is come full circle now. Also, meanwhile, Peltraki and Yaz have been... Actually, I honestly can't remember what they were doing, because, well, they end up finding other, like, crystals with things inside of them. But I don't know if they were specifically searching for that or not. I can't remember what they were doing. But I can remember that they don't really impact pretty much anything. And I hate to say it, but yeah, Peltraki and Yaz are useless to the episode by this point. I can't think of a single thing that wouldn't be different if they were just snipped out. The only reason Peltraki exists is to deliver dialogue and important information earlier in the episode, which kind of sucks because I think, is it Mark Addy who plays him? I think he's a good actor and he plays the role well, and he's entertaining enough to watch, but the character's just pointless. And Yaz is again left to the sidelines with not really much to do. But yeah, it's really, they're very forgettable in this episode. But anyway, Tzim-Sha reveals to the Doctor that this place that they're in is actually a giant super weapon that he's created, and she's rushing to try and find, the source of this power and like to try and stop it. And so she enters the room that Yaz and Peltraki had found with all like the crystals with the things inside of it, and they realize that they're shrunken planets, all shrunken down. Immediately, my mind went to the pirate planet, where this planet was being used as this essentially giant mining station where it would like basically materialize around planets and then just completely gut them of their minerals and then shrink them down and compress them. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. It's like the pirate planet. And then the Doctor goes and mentions, but this is impossible. Meanwhile, I'm thinking, but you've seen this before. You should know this isn't impossible. But whatever. Basically, Tzim-Sha is shrinking planets to just basically kill them. Give him this gratifying sense of being a god. Because before he was, the Senza's warrior race and he was hunting people for sport. Now he's taking whole planets for sport. Oh, and his next target is Earth. That's just... It doesn't have an impact on anything. It's really just kind of there to up the stakes and make it feel more like a finale. As soon as it targeted Earth, I'm like, okay, well now it feels like a finale because the whole Earth's at stake. But anyway, how he's able to do this is through the psychics. Their ability, they're able to channel their ability to send all this energy to the planet, shrink it down and compress it. And so the Doctor needs to find a way to stop this from happening. So she and Yaz realize they can use their neural blockers and put them on the psychic people. The Ux is their name. I haven't been using it so far, but so the Doctor changes the neural balancers to neural blockers to stop them from like sending their psychic signals out, and puts them on their heads. Earth is saved, easy as pie. And this is the part I mentioned earlier about the missed opportunity for consequences in terms of this atmosphere that's messing with all of them. Because I thought as soon as they said, oh, we're going to have to take off our neural balancers and take this risk, that this was going to lead to some sort of consequence of their minds being attacked. But the episode forgets about it for a while, briefly has the Doctor saying, oh, my head's starting to hurt, I'm getting a headache, and then it's like, can I take those neural balancers back? And there you go. So no consequences. So why even introduce that as an element? I mean, I know you need a solution of how to stop the Ux from sending out that power, but when you have something like that, you should also be adding in consequences. It would make it so much more impactful if they were getting actually affected by it and you felt like they were in danger, but we never do. While this is happening, Graham and Ryan have finished releasing all the prisoners, and Peltraki and Ryan are taking them away. Graham stayed behind because he wants to confront Tzim-Sha. and they have their confrontation, and Graham can't do it because he's the better man. And I did like this moment. It felt like a moment of growth, but at the same time, because it was only growth from something introduced in this episode, it isn't as powerful as it could have been, but that's fine. I think it worked. And then Ryan comes in just as Tzim-Sha is about to try and kill Graham, and Graham shoots him in the foot. And this leads to probably one of the funniest things this season, I think.
Shot him! Yeah, but just the foot. Just in the foot, just to shut him up. Don't tell the doc, she'd be livid.
Bradley Walsh is just so perfect in the role. I feel like I say that every episode, but he's just incredible. And I'm really glad that he's not going anywhere. But that's it for Tzim-Sha. Ryan finally gives Graham his fist bump, and Graham just gives this incredible look of confusion. It's awesome. And they stick him in one of his stasis pods that he was keeping his prisoners, and that's that for Tzim-Sha. Meanwhile, the Doctor hooks the Ux into the TARDIS's telepathic circuits to return the planets back to their normal place in space. They've become unstable and are about to explode or regrow or something right where they are, which obviously they don't want. And so that problem's solved too, and we get a couple of nice continuity references to Series 1 and Series 4. And yeah, everyone's returned back to Paltraki's ship where it's still functioning fine, so he can take them back home or whatever. And the Doctor and her companions get into the TARDIS to go off on more adventures, and the series ends on the TARDIS dematerializing. And that's the Battle of Ranskoor av Kolos. I will admit that ending, it left me feeling a little bit disappointed the first time. I do think that's a fitting shot, final shot for a series, but I was kind of expecting something a little bit more. And I do want to say, this episode feels like it has a lot of stuff it's trying to do, but it doesn't have enough time to do it. I know a lot of people have said that they've missed two-parters this year. I, for one, before the series aired, I wanted more two-parters because I tend to prefer stories that have cliffhangers and stuff. But honestly, I haven't really missed them too much this season. And this is the only episode this season that I could really say I felt like would have benefited from being two parts. Every other one maybe would have benefited from having more time, maybe being 60 minutes long, but this one should have been a two-parter. And it's kind of disappointing that it's just a single part, and then that leaves things to be rushed. And the confrontation between the Doctor and Graham and Tzim-Sha and all that, and all the other elements introduced in the episode, they aren't explored to the extent that they could be, which is too bad. All that being said, and I know I've probably complained about a decent amount of stuff in it, I still thoroughly enjoyed the episode, and I wouldn't necessarily call it overall a disappointment. I would say maybe a bit underwhelming, but I wasn't expecting that much. I wasn't expecting some massive crazy finale like Moffat always gave us, or RTD always upping the stakes. But I don't know, it's definitely a very different kind of finale than previous series. And in part, that's because there hasn't been a series arc leading up to it. And that's actually something I want to discuss in more detail later. I want to do a more detailed Series 10 overview video, but I do want to mention that it did feel kind of awkward to have this last episode connected to just the first two episodes in the series, and then you have 7 other episodes in between that have no relation, and it just felt sort of awkward to come back to that. So I feel like I don't mind there not being a series arc, but when you're going to be connecting the finale to past events like that, and to past things that have been mentioned, it just feels awkward if you don't have at least some sort of references or teasers in between. Like I said, I thought the episode was thoroughly enjoyable. It wasn't amazing. It didn't impress me. It was a perfectly average finale, I guess. It is probably near the lower end of my finales. At the very least, I can say that even though I have my issues with it, I can definitely say that I enjoyed it, and it didn't frustrate me and really piss me off at times, like The Wedding of River Song, or especially Hellbent. Oh, I hate that episode. But this one I thought was fine. I enjoyed watching it both times I saw it. It does have its flaws, which certainly bring it down, but I do think it was overall a perfectly well done episode, I guess. And yeah, I think in terms of series finales, it is near the bottom though, because most of the time series finales tend to be pretty incredible, and this one was not pretty incredible. I'll have my full rankings of series finales at the side. But yeah, I guess I'm going to give the Battle of Ranskoor of Kolos a 7.5 out of 10. And it's at the upper end of Chibnall's episodes this season, but still probably the lower half of episodes in the season overall. But anyways, like I said, I'm going to be doing a more in-depth afterthoughts video in a couple of weeks' time. I did a pre-thoughts video, and I want to do an afterthoughts video going into detail about some of the things I had discussed before, and seeing if it turned out how I expected it to be, what aspects were better or worse than maybe I anticipated, and yeah, I think that's probably about it. So thank you guys so much for watching. Please put in the comments below what you thought of this series and the series finale, and yeah, I guess I'll see you in a couple weeks with that Series 11 Afterthoughts, and in early January with the New Year's special resolution.